Thank you for tuning in to the Game Dev London podcast. Before we begin this episode, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your continued support during this unprecedented time. We're trying to bring you the highest quality content, but as you can imagine, there will be dips and changes through each episode as we try and work out the kinks of recording from home. In the meantime, we want to thank you for your continued support and hope you enjoy this episode of the Game Dev London podcast. Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast. I'm your host Adam Boyne and I'm here with
Dan Hawkins.
Dan Hawkins, recruitment consultant for Aardvark Swift. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you. Well, considering still in the house, but yeah, very good.
I mean, you can see from my lovely setup back here that you have a much tidier house than I have. Have you been able to get some chores done, run around the house, get things sorted?
No, my house is not as tidy as you
No.
think. And if this is a room, I picked a very nice clean wall at this bit. But no, at least I've got plenty of DIY things to do around the house. We've recently bought the house, so I've had.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
My partner's had a great big list of things for me to do to keep busy. So there's no chance of me being bored.
We're in the same situation. So we moved in a while ago, thankfully. But I've had my co-worker moved in during the first week of lockdown, I think it was.
Wow, yeah.
So he's had absolute chaos, like things like trying to get internet installed and engineers being severely limited and all this kind of thing. So he's had a bit of a nightmare. Ours hasn't been too bad. We had my partner doesn't work from home, whereas because I'm quite digital, it's not too bad. But she ordered a desk when we first shut down, and it turned up yesterday. So now she's set up on a desk. But before that, it was dining room table, spare keyboards and monitors, and cardboard boxes holding things up and all that kind of thing. Absolute madness. So thank you for joining us today. So the first thing I want to ask you is, how did you get started in the games industry?
I got started in the games industry by working with Aardvark Swift, really. This was my first sort of entry into that. So I've been working for Aardvark Swift for coming up for 3 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, which I love it. It's just such a fascinating industry. To be able to talk to people, so from a recruitment point of view, when you're looking at sort of other recruitment jobs compared to this, when you're talking to people, you're talking to people about real things that they're passionate about. It's not always just a means to an end. So things like, what projects do you want to work on? What games? What's your long plan? What games would you love to be part of? What art styles interest you? And yeah, so it's had me hooked from the beginning, really.
So you were doing that for the last sort of 3 years. What were you doing before? Was you in a different industry? What made you move across? Where were you?
Before that, I was a sales manager in a call centre. So I used to work for Vodafone.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was quite a change of career, really. But I've worked in sales, and so it's loosely based. It's loosely connected for about 5 years.
Okay, and then what was it specifically? Was it just, were you a big gamer beforehand? Was there something specifically that brought you over to the games industry that you were like, yes, that's where I want to be?
Well, I knew I wanted to work in recruitment. I knew that that's something that I wanted to do. But the video game specific, I'm a games player, and Aardvark Swift are fairly local to me as well. So it was not something, when I first thought, I'm going to be recruitment, I'm going to go into recruitment in games, because that didn't really pass my mind. But to find such let's say, a fairly key player in recruitment in the video games industry, locally to me, it was an amazing opportunity, and that's what I jumped at.
So especially looking at all the stuff that you've done, you've worked, been there for 3 years. I've seen people go through the system and fail to get that job and succeed. What is the key thing that you've seen, either that students aren't doing that they should be, or the key thing that everybody is doing that if you're not doing it, then you're just going to lose out?
Well, from a student point of view, it's certainly portfolio. Portfolio is the most important part, really. I mean, everyone can have a nice CV, but when you're a student, they're all going to kind of look the same. It's kind of upsetting when you see someone who's really talented not carry on with passion projects in the background.
Yeah.
So you see someone who's really talented, they come through university, they finish off with a few pieces that they've done for their course. But what we need to see after that, especially if it takes a few months, because it's a hard industry to get into, not everyone gets a job straight away. But what we need to see is is continued work, passion projects. Employees want to see that that's something that they enjoy doing. So yeah, it's staying on top of and keeping your portfolio up to date with work.
That was a big thing when I was a student, is that we didn't really get advice beyond like sort of general CV advice. No one ever advised us on our portfolios, and the difference I saw coming out of being a student and then and I do portfolio reviews at like EGX and stuff like that. The difference between the students who've sort of thrown something together last minute and you're just kind of looking through like, yeah, this is all right, and then somebody who's put a bit of thought and effort, got just like a WordPress site or something, but it looks neat and tidy and they've got their best stuff up front, and you can, the difference in terms of me just wanting time, I don't even need to see their CV. Like if I can see the work that I'm like, oh wow, you clearly know what you're doing, the difference in sort of my attitude towards them at like a minimum is huge. And it still shocks me that you get students now who you can ask, oh, so have you got your portfolio? And they go, no. And you're like, how am I going to hire you for anything then?
Absolutely, yeah. It's the most important part, isn't it? It's, yeah.
Great. So, you've been around a good number of time. Obviously, you know lots of different companies and speaking to them about, you speak to them about recruitment, I assume, young and old and all that kind of thing. We're in a bit of a weird period now, as I'm sure you know. What is the thing that you've sort of seen come out that's either changing or not changing in the industry based on sort of the people that you've been chatting to? Are you seeing attitudes change? We'll start with recruitment, then we'll move into a more wider thing. Have you seen that people are hiring more, less? Is everybody just gone straight to, you can work from home, that's fine? What are you seeing changing at the minute?
Well, it was at the start of all this, it was going to be quite concerning, and especially looking at the amount of people in especially some of the larger companies who've had to move to work from home, which is just a mammoth task if all of these programs and support functions aren't in place. It's been really, really encouraging to see so many companies move really smoothly to working from home, and development go full steam ahead, really, which is great. I think initially we saw, from a recruitment point of view, we saw companies say, well, we're not sure what we're going to do, but that only kind of lasted for a few weeks. With development going at full speed ahead just from home, they still need to make those key hires. They still need to expand the team in different directions at different milestones throughout the project. So we are seeing lots of remote starts being offered, remote contracts, which is brilliant. And yeah, it's really encouraging to see development still carrying on, and especially with demand through the roof for video games, demand that we've never seen before in the industry.
Definitely.
It's good to see. We're lucky to be in an industry that has moved. There's lots of other industries that haven't been as easy. That people have been laid off from redundancies and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's nice. It's encouraging to see the industry pull together and really tackle this quite smoothly.
It's been interesting to see so Yuki announced the numbers for 2019 in terms of sales and that kind of thing, and it's interesting to see how much digital is either keeping steady or going up, where physical is falling, which is something that obviously everyone's predicted for a long time now. But obviously, a state like this, when you almost literally can't get physical copies because you'd be relying purely on digital services to get them in the first place, and most of them have digital things, that we are looking at this sort of massive tectonic shift towards digital, which is not, the games industry was already going that way anyway because we are a digital industry. How do you think this is going to affect other physical things? So obviously you have lots of events that you're at and that kind of thing, and do a lot of physical recruitment and that kind of thing, talking to people. How do you think that's going to change going forward? Do you think it's going to be a lot more of a digital affair? I know the big Search for a Star event has got being announced digitally this year and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We've cancelled events we've not cancelled, we've adapted events. So Search for a Star is happening for us this week, which is a huge competition that we run for students to help them sort of stand out and help them get their first job. So we're currently conducting a load of mock interviews this week that would usually be done all on one day and getting everyone in one place and have an awards ceremony for the finalists. But we're doing all that remotely this week, which is going really quite smoothly. It's a lot of hard work. There's lots of challenges, but it's going very smoothly at the moment. And we're looking at, on Monday, we're going to be doing a virtual awards ceremony as well.
Awesome.
Just to make sure it still happens, because as soon as we put a lot of work into it, there's no way we could just kind of cancel it and not do anything about it. That's worked really well. Obviously, a lot of the industry shows, things like Develop, E3, that kind of thing, they're suffering. And that's certainly something that we use as a company, face-to-face. Opportunities like Develop are great for meeting lots and lots of clients face-to-face and building relationships and getting a much better understanding of the kind of sort of cultures that we get in different studios as well. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to affect it, to be honest, but it's certainly reduced the amount of face-to-face contacts that we have with our clients, which is obviously upsetting.
I think that it's going to be interesting across the board. I mean, obviously from every sort of angle. Like, so we do as a company, we normally go to events to meet and network with our potential clients, potential contract work, all that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out the digital ways to do that going forwards is going to be really interesting. And I imagine also if you are looking for work in the industry and that kind of thing, traditionally you'd go to your EGXs or even local events that have now all sort of just disappeared overnight, to try and find that kind of work. Where are you seeing, obviously Aardvark Swift, the platform is fantastic for sort of as a place to go and find work. How would you encourage people across the industry who are now looking for new roles and that kind of thing? Where would you recommend they go and look? How do they get, what's the best way for them to start looking for that next job if they are in a situation where they can't work?
But in a situation where they can't work,
so they've left their current job, or their current work has sort of dried up, or for whatever reason, and they're like, right, maybe they were a freelancer before and now they're in a situation where they can't, or they were doing something physical and now they've moved out and now they want to change to something digital and they're looking for a new role. Where do you recommend they sort of go and start investigating what's out there, given that they can no longer go to sort of these physical events anymore?
Well, as a recruiter, I think the first thing would be to speak to someone like me. That would be my stock answer, really. Let's have a chat. Let's have a chat. We can talk about what's out there. We tend to have a good bird's eye view of what's going on across the industry as a whole, because we have interactions daily with so many different development companies, and we know who are hiring, who are advertising but maybe can't make the hire yet, and that kind of thing. So having a chat with a recruiter can solve a lot. I think, but naturally as well, things like job boards, getting jobs direct, getting gi.biz, job boards like that are advertising roles all the time, and they're updating. If you look on their social channels, they're all the time updating on which clients are being most active and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, it's trickier. If that is how you get a job, usually, and it's an excellent way of doing it, because obviously you can sell yourself much better face to face. It's a lot easier to do so, and that is taken away. So this is all going to have to be digital. I think, interestingly, the whole industry is getting far better at video calls, like video calls. We certainly are. Seen a vast improvement in sort of how we conduct them and that kind of thing. So it's going to happen in the future.
So are you seeing, despite the fact that obviously physical connection is going up, but actually do you think connectivity is actually going up in terms of people being able to talk to each other and openly communicate, because there's more of these, bigger open, you get your Zoom calls and your big chats between industry groups and stuff. Are you seeing people becoming more connected despite fewer events, or are you seeing the reverse?
I think more regularly connected, yeah, because it's nice to talk to people. We do. Usually we'd have just one stand-up meeting at the start of the day at Aardvark Swift, but now we'll have a couple, and we'll make concerted efforts to have a chat, because that personal interaction isn't there in the office. It's much more of a treat. It's important to speak to people. You can't just be working here not speaking to anyone all day every day. So I'm having lots of people who are open to a chat about the industry, as well as speaking to my colleagues more regularly, probably, in a structured way, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting. So, my last year, so last calendar year, I was living far away from my office, so I was working from home 4 days a week. And a big thing that I found was it's a different feeling to working in the office every day. But the balance of that is that when you are communicating with people, your communications are almost more individually, more directly meaningful. You are trying to, because you want to get across all the information, you want to talk about what's relevant. And I think I found because there's obviously fewer communications now, in terms of being, I can't just go to the pub with a friend or meet a client at a cafe or something, that the individual chats that I'm having, even when they're just sort of big community chats, are more directly meaningful, and I think are forming better relationships with people. And I think a lot of them are very open, which means that there are great opportunities for people coming into the industry or people trying to, expand their horizons to join communities. You've got your Discords and your Twitter hashtag groups and all this, Slacks and all this kind of things, to find more people. And one of the things you alluded to before, and sort of connected to that, is the role of social media in this. Have you found that social media has become more active? Is there a particular form of social media that you find is better for the games industry in terms of trying to find people or groups or that kind of thing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely been more interaction. I think people are turning to social media more, not just professionally, but personally as well, to stay connected with the outside world as we're all stuck in our houses. So yeah, no, interaction has definitely gone up across LinkedIn, but also Twitter as well. I love Twitter for engaging with crowds, because you can follow the hashtags and the streams and that kind of thing. I think it's a really nice platform for being specific to the games industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I've seen maybe Twitter, and there's Indie Dev Hour and all that kind of thing. And when I was a student many years ago, that was sort of where I started in terms of going from knowing nobody in the games industry. I looked on Twitter and I found local game groups and stuff. So I would agree wholeheartedly with that in terms of that's the place to go and find people. So in terms of where we are now, what do you think? Obviously we're projecting in terms of when we'll be coming out of this and that kind of thing. What do you think you're going to see of? Oh no, that's what I wanted to ask. Sorry, I'm going to change the question. I'll come back to that one in a minute. So in terms of employment's going it's sort of dipped for a bit and then it's going back up again. We're starting to see companies try and find people. Have you seen any kind of shifts in the sort of people that companies are looking for? Because obviously they are a little bit trapped in so much as obviously normally there'd be a lot of face-to-face interviews, maybe we'll chat and then let's go to the pub afterwards or whatever, and people trying to get an idea of the sort of people that they're meeting before they hire them, where that is much more difficult now given the state of things. Are you seeing that they want slightly different skills, or is it same as it ever was?
I think skills-wise, it's always going to be with game development, especially on the development side of things, the programming, the arts and that kind of thing. Skills-wise, they're still going to be looking for exactly the same skills, because this is what they're looking for that particular project or that particular stage of the project. Culturally fit, it's much harder to tackle that. It's much harder to judge that without that personal interview. And I know lots of companies, cultural fit's massive in the games industry. To have that, to create the creative environment in a studio, the cultural fit for everyone is really important. And it's much harder, like I said, it's much harder without that going out for a beer, going out for a meal, without that couple of hours on-site interview where you get to talk about lots of things. It's much harder to test on a video call. So from that, in some instances, we've seen a little bit more flexibility when it comes to offering contracts. So I think some companies I've seen offering remote contracts, whereas usually it would be they'd only look for a permanent person for someone to come and join the team. And that's simply because they've got work that needs doing. Lots of people are available and able to work from home with the right skill set. And it's a quick fix. It's a fix. It's getting the skills and getting that knowledge that you need on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only seen a few friends get hired in the sort of window, and I've seen a lot more lose out on lots and lots of work and that kind of thing, especially freelancers. So it's interesting to think about where companies are sort of shifting, and if anything, you'd think if you do live in the north and the job is in the south, that actually that becomes a much more of a viable option than it has ever been. Just because you can work, this is proving that working remotely is a significantly viable option for almost all companies, and especially in the games industry, we're going to see a lot more of that. On that then, have you seen anything from the people that you're talking to, the recruits and companies, to be fair, that you sort of seen as a particularly good way of either working from home or developing your ability to work from home? Anything that people are doing that companies are seeing and going, oh yeah, you know what you're doing, or or the reverse, things that people are doing that you make you go, ooh, maybe don't do that. Maybe don't join every Skype every interview with a roller coaster Zoom background, as much fun as they are.
Yeah, they were fun for a bit, and then they get a little bit tedious now. I think. Yeah. Well, lots of companies have moved really quite smoothly. Some companies have struggled a lot more than others. I think the main focus has been getting people with the power that they need at home to develop. So while staying in contact with things like Microsoft Teams and Skype and that kind of thing is all very important, I think that's been quite an easy shift. I've not heard too many pains when it comes to that kind of thing. But I think for certainly the larger companies that, like I said earlier, don't have the infrastructure, the studios with 200-300 people plus, that have all of a sudden had to bring their teams to completely working from home with all the facilities and all the computing power that they need. That has been more of a struggle, I think, for companies, and that's been very kind of on a case-by-case basis, really, on what skills and what access that person needs to the pipelines and develop totally remotely. Some companies have been really quite set up for this. Us, for instance, I mean, we're not developing, so it'd be a lot easier for us. But we've had things in place to work from home for a very long time. So it's been really easy for us. Lots of things that we've got are all web-based. But for companies that haven't had that, and of course there's been a shortage of engineers who can professionally do that as well, because they're being called in by companies all over the country. And I think that has been the toughest part for the companies that I know who have struggled a lot more than others. But right now, I can't think of any clients who haven't managed that now. So this was all in the first couple of weeks. When we talked about teething problems and companies saying, well, we don't know what we're going to do, we have to have a look at it. This all happened in the first few weeks. To my knowledge now, like I said earlier, development's going full steam ahead at the vast majority of companies we work with, which is really, really encouraging to see.
Excellent. So, taking on from your sort of the company as a whole, Aardvark and that kind of thing. Now, obviously, the answer to this question has changed probably quite a lot in the last sort of 6 weeks. Where did and do you see your role sort of developing over the next? Well, normally I'd say 6 months. This time I'm going to say 18 months, just because it's a big window of what might be happening here. Over the next sort of 18 months, how do you see your role sort of developing? Obviously, there's and how did you see it, and how has that changed? Do you think you're going to expand in the same way that you were going to before? Do you think it's going to change? What are your thoughts in terms of that sort of your personal role?
That's tough, really. It's a tough question, because we don't know how much this is affecting yet. I don't think that we've seen the full effect on the video games industry yet. I think that later on down the line, when projects are being wrapped up, and especially when we're talking about co-development studios and them kind of places, whether they're going to get the next projects or not is the worry for me. As Aardvark Swift, if the industry is healthy, we're healthy. We obviously we're not developers, but we're kind of at the edge of the industry. So we're as healthy as the industry is. So if we do start to see projects being pulled, and smaller companies or co-development companies suffering from that, we're suffering from that as well. But I don't think that we've seen the full effect yet. I think that'll be later on down the line.
It's very strange for us just as an industry, obviously, because on the one hand we produce what is essentially digital content, so we are able to continue, but on the other hand we need people for that, and obviously people are within limits, and we've seen AAA companies, Naughty Dog delaying Last of Us indefinitely and all these kind of things, big games being delayed because we're in such a weird period. But then again, flip it again, we're seeing a massive rise in digital gaming. We saw the World Health Organization basically putting out saying maybe playing video games is a good idea for social engagement, all this kind of thing, which is a flip on there. It might be an addictive thing, which was quite funny. So it's where do you? I mean, it's obviously it's projecting. It's just it's interesting to hear your thoughts just from your perspective on it. Where do you think it may land in terms of we're seeing potentially the economy of games rising rapidly because people are playing more games, buying more games, and have not a lot else to do, unfortunately, in the scenario. But by the same token, we're also seeing the industry sort of trying to wiggle its way around the situation, and some places hiring, some places. Unfortunately, laying people off. We saw with sort of extended games industry, Magic Leap laying off 1,000 people yesterday because of their change of direction, which is awful. But you're seeing both sides of those coins. Where do you think it's going to sort of sit in 12 months' time? I know we're just speculating, but it's just interesting to hear from your perspective.
Well, I hope that the increase in demand and the increase in profits in the video games industry is going to have a knock-on effect to more intuitive thinking when it comes to working from home and how you can run companies from home and people doing that successfully and hopefully the industry expanding. Typically, if we see an increase in profits and an increase in demand, the industry needs to grow to accommodate that. So I really hope that that's what happens, and I think it will. I think that's what will happen. I think the layoffs and the shutdowns that we see at the moment, I'm hoping that'll slow down. Those companies can develop remotely, and hopefully it's not a massive amount of time before we are able to go into studios, maybe one day a week, or attend meetings in a more face-to-face way. And hopefully that's not too long.
So speaking of the industry, actually, and drilling down a little bit, have you started to see a change in the sort of companies that are recruiting? Because obviously we talk about the games industry as just a whole, but actually within that you have a range of companies going from your AAAs who obviously, because of the sheer number of people they have, are going to be hit one way or another. But you have your small indies, your micros and your SMEs and all this kind of thing, who are in kind of a weird state by being both flexible because they were small to start with, but also if one person goes down, it's a major impact. Have you started to see a change in the sort of people who are looking for roles through you? Or indies sort of building on the advantage of the increase in demand? Or is it still the same? Is it not really affecting who's looking for work in the same kind of way?
Again, it's pretty much the same. Like I said earlier, companies are developing. Lots of them are developing at near on the same rate as what they were doing beforehand. So they still need it. Just because you're developing from home doesn't mean you don't need that technical artist or the increase on the QA team to test that part of the project at that stage throughout the development. Maybe that's being pushed back a little bit with working from home kind of slowing things slightly. But these key hires still need to be made. If you're going to develop a game, you need the same amount. You still need the same skills whether you're doing it at home or in the office. Some positions, so certainly I've not seen many positions for kind of HR recruitment.
Okay.
I've not seen as many for kind of internal recruitment roles or maybe roles that are, I don't like to use the word non-essential, but not core development. I haven't seen a bit of a decrease in that, but again, if you need 5 programmers to be able to develop your game, you still need them if you're working from home.
And I imagine, especially in those kind of roles, the skill set requirement is going to change drastically. I mean, in the short term, long term, who knows? But in the short term, you need HR people with digital skills because there isn't that just face to face. It's not. It's less sort of events based and interviews and person to person going around speaking to people, and much more leaning towards how do you manage the physical people in a digital company when you can't physically go and ask them. You have to try and reach out and do that kind of thing. So I imagine everybody sort of, we're in that, I mean, you've alluded to it yourself, we're in that sort of early period still where companies are just trying to figure out quite how it's all going to land, and some things are staying the same. As you said, demand is up, games are going to get made, whatever the case things, but other areas like the fact that you can't physically go and speak to people, or you can't go to events, that kind of thing, are in a sort of a shaky state as we try and figure out how they land. So yeah, just across the board, it's going to be it's an interesting time, and I think we're in the early days of it now, and it's going to be interesting to see where we land come 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years, and see how and then look back and see how this all affected. Look back with 2020 vision. It's my one joke for the day. That's it. There we go. I'm done. I'm out now.
Nice to slip in there. Very funny.
Excellent. Cool. Okay, I think that just about wraps us up in terms of time. So the only leaves me to say thank you very much, Dan, for coming and speak to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And thank you everyone for tuning into the Game Dev London podcast. Hopefully you've checked this out. If you checked this out audio, go check out the video. If you checked it out on video, go check out the audio. And stay tuned for more interviews with more lovely people from the games industry. I have been Adam Boyd, and this has been the Game Dev London podcast.